So at that Trump cabinet meeting yesterday, he was asked about the Canadian election and whether or not he has spoken with the newly minted PM, Mr. Carney, and Trump had this to say.
Are you interested in rebuilding relations with Canada, and if so, how?
No, well, I think we're going to have a great relationship. He called me up yesterday. He said, "Let's make a deal." You know, he was running for office. They both hated Trump, and it was the one that hated Trump, I think, the least that won. I actually think the conservative hated me much more than the so-called liberal. He's a pretty liberal guy. But no, I spoke to him yesterday. Couldn't have been nicer. And I congratulated him. You know, it was a very mixed signal because it's almost even, which makes it very complicated for the country. It's a pretty tight race. But he's a very nice gentleman, and he's going to come to the White House very shortly, within the next week or less.
Oh, interesting.
Maybe Pierre Poilievre was unhappy with Trump because he made winning for conservatives that much more difficult. That may have something to do with it. Carney is a wonderfully nice man. It's interesting because just to refresh recollections, this was part of his victory speech the other night.
Our old relationship with the United States, a relationship based on steadily increasing integration, is over. The system of open global trade, anchored by the United States, a system that Canada has relied on since the Second World War, a system that, while not perfect, has helped deliver prosperity for a country for decades, is over. These are tragedies, but it's also our new reality. We are over the shock of the American betrayal, but we should never forget the lessons. We have to look out for ourselves. And above all, we have to take care of each other.
Yay!
I'm sure
Everybody
Neil
goes
Young
home
was
happy.
singing along to that tune. Okay. All right. Betrayal. Essentially our alignment with the United States is over. Now, I understand victory night and overheated rhetoric and things will be different behind closed doors and they'll do the photo ops to make nice. But still, this Carney character is a leftist. So he may be more professional than that grade school drama teacher that used to be their prime minister, but that doesn't mean things are going to go swimmingly. I'll tell you what, though, somebody else who opined post-election in Canada that is perhaps more of an interesting political figure, this Danielle Smith, who is the premier of Alberta. She was much less conciliatory to Mark Carney than was President Trump.
To the new Prime Minister and the Liberal Party, I have one message. Alberta has had enough. Enough with Ottawa trampling over our provincial jurisdiction like Canada's Constitution doesn't exist. Enough with the meaningless virtue signaling climate policies that only make Canadians poorer and threaten our energy security. Enough of their screw the West, we'll take the rest mentality. Enough with their soft on crime policies that let repeat offenders roam the streets on bail. Enough with their unsafe supply, their open border policies, their censorship laws. The list goes on and on.
Can we do? Can we have the Canadians call another election and see how Danielle Smith will do against Carney? Jerry Agar is a Toronto Sun columnist. He's also the host of the Jerry Agar Show on News Talk 1010. That's CFRB in Toronto, and former talk show host in Chicago, WLS, where we met many years ago. Jerry, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Good to be with you. I would congratulate you on what you did as I was listening there, because you guys have a pretty good understanding of what's going on here in Canada for, American broadcasters.
For a couple of Yankees.
No, I think that oftentimes for good reason. Oftentimes, American media pays no attention to Canada because why would you? But you guys have a pretty good understanding of what's going on. So,
well, we might take you over. So now everyone has piqued their interest about this
problem,
51st
Amy.
state.
Yeah.
See, that was the problem. I don't think the tariffs were the issue. I think we've had tariff issues back and forth between Canada and the United States before, and we've overcome it. You've got even some Republicans now trying to stop Trump with the tariffs. That's going to be a self-correcting problem. It was that 51st state and thing, and it freaked the left out. For people who don't know, this is really a three-party country. It's not a two-party country like the United States. We've got the conservatives, the liberals, and the communists, who were called the National Democratic Party, the NDP. And the NDP so freaked out about that they abandoned their party and their principles and teamed up with the liberals, and that's how the liberals eked out this minority government.
Now, what about what Trump said about Polyev and he hated Trump more than Carney, and the antagonism Trump seemed to have for Polyev right from the start. Do you have any insight on that?
I don't understand why he would say that, because you played a clip there of Mark Carney's attack on the United States, the current administration. He's really talking about Trump and appealing to that base on his victory speech, as you pointed out. That was stronger stuff than I've heard from Polyev. Polyev was just going to stand up to Trump. The problem was that people on the left, including, I think, Mark Carney, sold the idea to the left in this country that Polyev was actually very much like Trump. He'll just sell the country out to Trump. That was what they were saying during the election.
Well, it was so bad. I mean, he even, not only did he lose the election, but he lost his seat in Parliament.
Well, the curious thing is that, people like to talk about how, the conservatives just imploded. They were leading for a while, and then the 51st state thing happened, and Trudeau stepped down, so he wasn't a target anymore, and the conservatives collapsed. They didn't collapse. Their vote total stayed about the same, and they have 26 more members of parliament now than they had before we went into the election. So, yes, it's an interesting thing that Pierre Poilievre lost the seat he'd held for 20 years, but and we'll have to see how they deal with that. But that's not a conservative implosion. It's realistically, to me, the left abandoned the NDP, turned it into a two-party race, and the Liberals went from 22% to 42%.
And the other thing that was observed by John Halpin over at the Liberal Patriot was that Carney did not focus on some of the more incendiary cultural issues, the things that Trudeau liked to carry on about trans rights and these things. Instead, he focused on sort of bread and butter, nationalistic-oriented economic interests, even though that issue matrix didn't change. It's still the same party platform. He still has the same positions, but the emphasis was advantageous.
Well, that's exactly right. And the first number of policies that he announced were actually policies that Pierre Poilievre had been pushing for a number of years. An example, getting rid of the carbon tax. Well, Mark Carney came along and said, well, yes, we're going to get rid of that carbon tax. Anybody in this country who believes that Mark Carney is not a carbon tax enthusiast and won't punish this country by changing from consumer carbon tax to industrial carbon tax, as if that doesn't trickle down to the consumer, is a complete idiot. But, we have a fairly substantial number of complete idiots voting in this country.
Yeah, we're familiar with the concept in Illinois. So
am I.
You've got a taste of it too.
Well, Mark Carney's a net zero guy. Gosh, if maybe the election would have been a few days later, and Poilievre could have made hay out of the power outages in Spain and Portugal, pursuing the same policies that Mark Carney wants to pursue for Canada. Maybe that could have made a difference. But it seems to me that what you're saying is it just became a referendum on Trump, and Poilievre was seen as a proxy for Trump.
Well, yes, I really truly believe that was a large part of it. And in fact, there's a former premier of this province, Kathleen Wynne, and she's very, very liberal. She happened to be in the radio station to go on our morning show. She wasn't in to go on my show a couple of weeks ago as we were approaching this thing. And I went over to her before she went on the air, and I said, what is going on with the NDP voters? They're abandoning their party. And she said, Jerry, the left is freaked out about the possibility of a conservative government. They look at it like getting a Trump government, and they will abandon their party. And she was exactly right.
What about this premier of Alberta, this Danielle Smith we played the clip of? She seems to be angling for something bigger than Alberta Premier, the way she has taken on Carney out of the gate, no?
She's very popular with the right, and it's instructive, I guess, how much the left hates her. They really hate her. They think she's a right-wing wingnut. She's actually going to put forth, I think, the possibility of Albertans to vote on a referendum for abandoning Canada and joining the United States. That won't pass, but it's not insignificant that about 25% of Albertans might vote yes for that. And I just saw a chart. I'm going to do this on my show today. I just saw a chart of what young people are doing. Young people were voting Conservative for the first time this time around, and with the possible exception of the small province of New Brunswick, every other province is losing young people. They're all going one place, Alberta.
Well, that's interesting.
Really?
Do you see the same divide that we see in this country if you're talking about sort of Gen Z? That there's a real divide in terms of young Gen Z men versus Gen Z women in terms of their voting habits?
Yes, but even younger women are tending a little more conservative than they used to. It wouldn't put the Conservatives over the top, but young men were polling to vote in much higher numbers than ever Conservative, and I think they did. I mean, the thing that prevented the Liberals from getting the majority that they had hoped to get was there were a couple of areas here in Ontario, which is thought of as being very Liberal generally in federal elections, where it turned, and that's where the 26 extra members of Parliament came from places like here, and Windsor, by the way, and Windsor, Ontario, where there was a real upset and Conservatives took away a lot of Liberal seats. Well, that's where the car manufacturing is, and that was a tariff thing.
And so how do you see the tariff thing playing out here as there's a sense of urgency, I think, with the Trump administration to negotiate deals and consummate deals with trading partners? And I assume that would include our North American friends in Canada and Mexico. How do you think Carney plays this?
I don't know how you play it with Trump, or maybe remind him that in 2018, when he made the North American Free Trade Agreement, whatever they called it at the time, Trump came out with his usual language. This is the best agreement ever made. Nobody's ever seen a great agreement like this. Now all of a sudden he doesn't like it. But I think what I'm hoping will kind of turn it around is I saw 3 stories in American newspapers this morning. Caterpillar, as a large company, saying their sales are down because of the tariffs. They're worried about having to lay people off. Large groups of business people lobbying the White House to stop it with the tariffs, especially with China, but some have mentioned Canada. And the other is that you have Republicans now who are starting to vote with the Democrats to bring down the tariffs. Tariffs are a bad idea for everybody, and I'm just hoping that Trump, if he doesn't catch on, starts to see the lack of support that he has for those tariffs and starts to make deals. And if he wants to make a deal and then come out and crow about how he made this fabulous deal, let him have the credit. Just get rid of the tariffs.
Well, Carney has a risk here too. I mean, if he is too hostile to Trump, particularly in person to his face, then he's going to get the Zelensky treatment, and he's not going to like it, because I assume that Canadian politicians, even Mark Carney, understand that if this did persist and Trump wanted to ratchet it up against Canada or most any other country, America would do much more damage to Canada than Canada could do to America, even though both countries could be hurt.
Well, sure. And Trump is a thin-skinned individual who, by the way, in case you and your listeners think that I'm coming off as anti-Trump, I would have voted for him, and I think a lot of what he's doing domestically I would be happy about. But with the situation with Canada, I'm not. I'm very upset with him on that 51st state thing, because now I've got another Liberal government to deal with in this country. Carney, though, and you bring up a good point, though, Dan, and a good question, because the thing with Carney is he's very good at appearing to be a gentleman until you disagree with him, in which case he will, and there's video of this, shake his finger in your face and tell you, I'm explaining this to you.
That's not gonna work in the Oval Office. I think we both know that.
So what do we know about Mr. Carney? He's a former central banker. He's 60 years old. Anything else?
Well, he's ultra liberal. He believes, as Dan said, in that net zero thing. He believes the carbon taxes we had, which were hurting this country, were not high enough. He believes, and he wants to spend hundreds of billions of more dollars. Hundreds of billions of dollars, a big figure in the United States, but in a country of 40 million people. I mean, I'm wondering if I have enough money to prop him up.
Yeah, right. Anything else on Polyev, like a local issue that may have been missed or something, a strategic error he made? Because, as I'm watching this guy, sort of like the rise of Milei in Argentina, I'm like, this guy is great. And to have another sort of conservative reform, free market person in the Western Hemisphere like Milei, who's been outstanding, or like Polyev, who I thought could have been, I just want to make sure we're not missing something that we shouldn't.
Well, I like him. He's been on my show a number of times, sometimes on the phone, but he's been in the studio, and I've met him. And by the way, we got him to eat apples while he was on the air.
Good for you.
Yes.
Famous moment where he just got tired of a reporter and started eating an apple. But I really wish he'd been elected. I think if there was a strategic error that he made, is that one of the things he said, and I agree with him, is our federal government is far too big, but he was going to do it in the kindest way, which is through attrition. He wouldn't just come in and fire people. So he said, for every 3 people who quit, retire, whatever their reason is for moving on, we will hire 2. And so over time, we're going to make it a lower government. Here's the problem. Ottawa is the Washington, D.C. of Canada, and that's where he is. That's his territory. And so he told all these civil servant people voting in his district that he was ready to get rid of them.
Yeah, that could explain losing a seat, if not the national election. Jerry Agar is a Toronto Sun columnist. He's also the host of the eponymous Jerry Agar Show on News Talk 1010 CFRB in Toronto. Jerry, always good to talk to you. Thanks so much.
Thanks very much. Thank you.
You're the best. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
This is the morning show more Chicago radio listeners are choosing. This is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
Come on with this, people. Move it!
Did you really think you could make that company deliver yourself?
Oh, I cannot handle any more traffic.
You could be getting much more done at your place of business.
I've wasted 45 minutes and now this place is gonna close.
Time is money.